Welcome to In the Garden. Good morning. I'm Steve Dubik, your moderator, coordinator from the Montgomery County Master Gardeners. And our experts today are Lonnie Parker and Lisa Diamond. We are the Master Gardeners in the Montgomery County. We're part of the University of Maryland Extension. I'd like to tell you about some of the services that we provide. We include our speakers group, demonstration gardens, youth gardening programs, therapeutic horticulture, special events, and Ask a Master Gardener, just to name a few. Today, we have Lisa, who's the co-chair of Therapeutic Horticulture Program, will tell us about her special program. Lisa?
Steve, thanks for introducing me. It's with great pride and a lot of joy that Wendy Band, my co-chair, and I lead this program in our county. Just to talk about its slight interruption with COVID, as everything was on a hiatus, so was therapeutic horticulture. But with special permission, we love our residents and the nursing homes and assisted living units that we serve so much, and felt that they experienced probably the worst of COVID in their isolation, which was extraordinary, and the way they were devastated by the disease. And so we managed to do something outside of our normal program guidelines and deliver flower arrangements to them that we made individually, not together, and we would drop them off during COVID at the door and let them enjoy some contact with us. And we're very excited that within this month and the next month, our programs are coming back online, and we'll be out doing our work with the public shortly. Therapeutic horticulture was started in this chapter in the late 90s, and Wendy and I know we owe so much to the person who ran it before us for over 20 years and grew it from one program to the 22 programs that we currently have. We found out when doing research, which was unknown to us before then, that we are among or one of the largest therapeutic horticulture programs run by a master gardening chapter in the United States. And we are always looking to expand, and our only limit is the volunteers that sign up to work with us. We have about 120 volunteers at present, and our 22 programs range in nature from autistic youth working in the Durwood Demo Garden, and that is a weekly seasonal program. And we have Holiday Park Plant Clinic at the wonderful senior center. And at that clinic, able seniors who are ambulatory and come in on their own are offered a wonderful selection of flowering plants and vegetable plants, and more at a very reasonable cost, grown by our master gardeners who are dedicated to this year-round. And more than anything, they interact with this part of the public and give these seniors confidence and ideas and support for their growing plants, often on balconies and in limited space. That's a wonderful program, and that meets several days a week. The larger part of our program, it occurs at nursing homes and assisted living facilities, and that there we meet mostly once a month for an hour with the residents. And at these programs, we have a wonderful dedicated group of volunteers whose real goal is to bring nature and gardening into the lives of people who probably gardened on their own until they were living there. But now they're disconnected very much from nature, from the outdoors, and from activities they may have loved when they were more active. So our job, as we feel it, is to reconnect these people and keep them feeling and experiencing nature in their worlds. And we do training for our volunteers several times a year, and we share many resources, but all of our programs are unique. Our leaders create unique programs every month with thematic elements and seasonal programming, and we try to share all of our programs with each other, so we learn things from one another. But it's with a lot of creativity and joy that we develop programs involving flower arrangements. That's most common. And whenever we bring floral materials and plant materials into the groups, we make sure to discuss with them what the plants are, where we've grown them in our gardens. We often share photos and videos of our yards with them so they can see where the plants have come from. We pass them around talking about shape, color, smell, and texture. If they've grown those same plants when they were homeowners, if there are things that they love or things that they're interested in. And then we expand and always have an educational theme when we do our programming. And examples in the fall, we have done programs on straw and hay. What's the difference? Most people don't think about that. We bring in a little miniature hay wagon and a real life-size scarecrow that still has room to be stuffed. And we let every one of the participants handle the straw and feel it and stuff it. And we talk about going on hay rides when they were young. And we try in all of our programs to ignite all of their senses, always around the nature theme. But we try to include poetry, singing, and with songs that they would know from their era, but about these themes. And it just really shows us all the time that you're never too old to learn something new about nature. That's sort of been our theme since the beginning. And we find that we reach people in all different ways. So we try to give them a variety of ways to come to things. A wonderful program that a group of ours created a number of years ago is on the beach theme. And the highlight of that program, which the project was a simple, clear container filled with sand and beach grasses and shells. But the highlight was that someone wrote a beautiful beach meditation. And they had people close their eyes and imagine this day at the beach. And that program as well involved people thinking of memories connected to, and most of these people talked about the beaches in Maryland and how they'd enjoyed them over the years. We do programs with houseplants. We grow things from seeds and cuttings. We've done programs with salad boxes. And then a few months later, when the boxes have been tended outside and the lettuces have grown, we have a salad party to sort of celebrate that they've grown something that is actually edible. We make arrangements in pumpkins. We do pressed flowers. We make sachets and soaps, herbal teas, and dried flower arrangements. And our dried flower arrangements come from our wonderful garden up at Durwood, which is another area where therapeutic horticultural gardeners work. They tend a section of that garden, growing plants just for our programs and that are used in the 22 different programs. And the way we go in the fall and collect dried materials from the garden that we use for the rest of the winter in our arrangements is an example of how we try to recycle as much as possible. We recycle at every level, having materials exchange, reusing containers, saving things from one program to the next. And our programs have very little to no cost to the places that we work, reimbursed us a tiny bit. But more than anything, we really feel that this is an underserved part of our population. It's very easy to forget when we serve the public that there are people we don't see out at our events around the county. And we take a lot of pride that we bring the best of master gardening, creativity, and an energy and interest in serving these populations with therapeutic horticulture. And we look forward to doing it back up to speed in months to come. Thanks, Steve.
Oh, thanks, Lisa. Yeah, as Lisa mentioned, the Therapeutic Horticulture Program is one of the largest. It's the largest in the state, probably. She mentioned probably one of the largest ones in the country, and it's very successful. And it's thanks to Lisa and Wendy and folks like that who made it very successful. So this is a portion of the program where we talk about gardening questions, and I just want to let you know if you have any gardening questions at this time. Please, we'll send. We'll have it posted on our website here shortly. You can send in a gardening question. If we have time today, we'll try to answer it. If not, we will try to catch it on our next session. But please remember to include your email address so we can follow up. You can also view previously answered questions from In the Garden on our YouTube. Since our last program, we've got about 10 questions, and I was going to start off with our first question, and it's regarding a plant material has some unusual growth. And this one, I think we're going to ask Elisa. So there's probably going to hopefully see a picture here shortly. The question is, what's wrong with my tree? And how do I get rid of it? That's the question, Lisa.
Well, what's wrong with your tree is that it has what is called a witch's broom. When I became a master gardener, I would say I thought this is one of the most fun things that we learned about in our training. It is, if anything, a disfigurement of the plant material, and one that you may not have seen. I have in my yard in a tree that hangs over from my neighbors, and there's more than one witch's broom in that tree, and I see it all the time hanging into my backyard. And I can't fix it, but I can look at it, and it is sort of fun, but not if it is something you don't want to see on your plant. The one that we're looking at, which is on an evergreen, is quite different from most that I have seen, which are on deciduous trees. And I can't tell perfectly from the picture, but this may be one where the removal may be possible. But let me go back to describing sort of what is happening on the tree. Witch's brooms are a cluster of shoots that grow very tightly close to one another. To me, this doesn't look like a witch's broom, but when you see it, typically it looks like a bird's nest up in the branches of a tree. And all of these little suckers and shoots are coming out. They're short, they're fat, and they are sticking out. It reminds me of someone sticking their finger in a wall socket, the little cartoon, and all the hairs on the head stand straight out. It certainly, it shouldn't look like that. But witch's brooms are caused by a really wide variety of things. They could be fungal, viral, or photoplasmas. And mites, mistletoe, environmental damage, and I think it's more common than it's thought, a mutation in the vegetative cells can cause this witch's brooming. In most cases, it is killing off some of the sap that flows up through the tree, and that area of the tree pops out with the witch's broom and all the shoots. But it may also be killing off growth in that area. You may find that there's less vigorous blooming in that area, and that nutrients have been taken away from other parts of the plant. But phytoplasmas are related to bacteria, and they involve an interruption of the flow of the sap by damaging the tissue of the plant. That may be a cause. That can be in elms, not in this case, in elms and in walnut trees, and also lilac and dogwoods, willows, but also fungi and viral causes. And in this case, this evergreen, it's more likely to be that there's a fungal cause at work. But with witch's brooms, most of the time, if you don't have to remove it, and you have to decide if you want to remove it and what your tree will look like after that. When I'm looking at this example, it may not always be possible to remove that section without making the tree look even worse, having a big hole in it, or it may be inaccessible. So it's really the homeowner's choice if you want to prune out the affected areas, if it can be gotten to, and or to talk to an arborist if you think that the whole tree is suffering, in which case you have to consider whether you're going to keep the tree or not. But in most cases, witch's brooms are not fatal to the trees and the plants that host them. And one of the examples of that is more in Colorado, where mistletoe, which we all think of mistletoe as fun at Christmas time, but it is a real big problem. It attaches itself to trees, causing witch's brooms. And that's really a different story. But I think this one, it might just be a curiosity that you could sort of live with. I think it's actually pretty attractive, but it's really up to the homeowner.
Thanks, Lisa. Okay, our next question is for Ronnie. This one is we got a client sent in a picture. This is coming from Ron. It looks like he has something on his grass, something white growing on his grass. Can you help us out, Ron?
Okay, thank you, Steve and Ron. The white stuff that you see on the grass is powdery mildew. It's a common fungal disease in our area. It occurs in conditions that are cloudy, cool, and humid. So we are just right for powdery mildew. It's very common in spring and fall, again, having to do with the conditions. Infected blades will gradually turn from green to tan to brown and die. So what can you do about this? You can improve ventilation by cutting back any surrounding trees and shrubs by pruning them or removing them, just so there's more air. You could also mow to the highest recommended height, usually 3 inches at least, and avoid other kinds of stresses such as drought. The fungus that causes this disease overwinters, so if you're not able to improve sunlight or air circulation to ventilate, you may wish to consider more shade-tolerant grass cultivars for your turf. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Our next question comes from Mary Lou, and she has an oak tree has some branches dying back. This is kind of a really common problem we're now seeing. We're seeing a lot of oaks, particularly white oaks, with branch dieback. I see a lot of it in my neighborhood, and it's probably caused by a number of things. And so it's gotten the name called oak decline. So it's probably caused possibly by abiotic things, let's say root restricted areas where the roots can't really grow out really as far as and as much as they need to support that plant material. It could be also a combination of things like borers, vascular diseases, fungi or bacteria that are clogging the vascular system, essentially the plumbing system of the plant. Certain trees like white oaks, they don't really like their soils being really saturated. Certain oaks, like the swamp white oak and the pin oak, can handle soils a little wetter. Other oaks like white oaks and the black oaks and the chestnut oaks like soils a little drier. So we've been also getting changes in our patterns of precipitation over the last several years. So these factors may stress the tree and predispose it to be weakened. And weakened trees often give off chemicals that allow insects like borers to recognize that they're there, and they take advantage of these weakened trees. So it's sort of a complex series of events that weaken the tree and causing the tree to get into a situation where it starts to decline, and eventually often it dies. We're seeing more and more of this in our area. Some of it may be due to climate change, but it's a quite common phenomenon, unfortunately. And with any large tree, if you have questions about it, maybe removing the tree or it's trying to evaluate its conditions, you should contact a certified professional arborist. You can go to the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, their website, and just put in there, certified arborist, and you can get there's a link there where if you put your zip code in, they'll list all the licensed arborists that service your area. So if you do have a large tree and there's large branches, I would consult with a professional arborist and try to see what recommendations may be necessary. It may just need to be pruned. There may just be a large number of branches over time that have been collected over there. It's not always necessarily, removal may be involved, but it just may need to be cared for. So let's see. Our next question is for Ronnie. And in this case, they have a question about coming from Katie, and it's about moving irises. So we got a large number of irises she has there, Ronnie.
Yeah, irises are great this time of year. So, and I'm a particular fan, particularly of these Siberian irises. But I think here you're talking. So the Siberian irises are easy. You just remove clumps and transplant them. The Dutch irises, which are the big, really beautiful ones with a beard and so on, need a little more attention. They're larger, they're showy. They need to be transplanted every 2 to 5 years or they will stop flowering. So you do need to move them. First, once they've finished blooming, you should cut off the stems and then wait 2 to 3 months after the bloom and then dig them up, separate them into at least 6-inch pieces, leaving the leaves also at about 6 inches. Then you plant the new rhizome horizontally in the ground, not too deep, just about 1.5 to 2 inches below the soil and about 1 to 1.5 feet apart. And you're all set, and you'll have lots more irises. You might want to note that the Dutch irises do get the borer that Steve referred to with regard to the trees. As far as resources, there's a lovely site, www.irises.org, that has a lot more information if you'd like to know more about it. Thank you, Steve.
Okay. Our next question is for me. It's submitted by Deb from Rockville, and she has a large number of mushrooms. The question goes, in the last several years, thousands of mushrooms have popped up in my yard. It was recommended that I remove them by hand with gloves from someone with expertise with mushrooms, as they were toxic. I believe they've got them all. There were so many, I am not entirely sure. I want to let my dogs back in the yard, so I'm also trying to assess how toxic they are. If I missed a few, is that a problem for the dogs? Now that I picked them up, is the soil toxic? Okay. Yes. Deb sent in several pictures, and there are quite a large number of mushrooms. So mushrooms kind of work like this. Most mushrooms feed on organic matter, and the organic matter may be coming from something that's underneath the ground, from dead root system of a tree or a shrub. Sometimes we apply wood chips, mulch on the surface. The mushrooms may feed off that. So once the food supply is exhausted, the mushroom problem should subside over time. So I'm not sure whether there's a great influx this year. There's probably a large amount of organic matter. Now, sometimes if the conditions aren't right at a certain part of the year, you won't see a lot of mushrooms. The next year, you'll see a lot of mushrooms. And it just maybe, particularly at the time of the year, there's enough moisture in the soil, and the mushrooms decide to start to essentially create these toadstools. It's the way they procreate. It's where that large amount of mushrooms, I would be concerned if you have a pet. I know you've done your best to try to remove them. As far as toxic they are, it's really outside my wheelhouse. I'm not really sure which exactly mushroom you have from the pictures. I have a good idea, but probably this is something where you need to have somebody who's really has sort of skilled in this area and get a live sample to look at to be sure. So I in the past, there's several mushroom societies we have in our area, and I know sometimes the DC Mycological Society is very active, and they've often helped people out trying to identify mushrooms. And I think they have open meetings, and it might be a good group to talk to. But the good news is, I think their situation is going to subside over time. As long as you're not adding more wood chips, more leaf mold to the situation, it should kind of go away on its own over a couple of years. So I wouldn't recommend using any kinds of chemicals to try to, deter the mushrooms, any kind of fungicides or things like that. And most of these mushrooms are not problematic to the plants. They're simply breaking down the organic matter in the soil. Some of them are actually beneficial. The ones that are usually more problematic to a plant are often found real close, right around the collar, right around the trunk or of the tree or the branch, right in the ground. They're usually closer in. So these, I wouldn't worry about them too much. And I think what you did is, if it is an issue, you are concerned about pets or other neighbors' pets coming in and picking them up, and I would just put them into your compost pile. I wouldn't worry about them. So hopefully over time, the situation will go away on its own. So our next question is for Lisa. And this one is about weed control, about a weed known as smartweed. So let's see, Lisa, do you have any ideas for helping out Robin from Rockville on controlling Pennsylvania smartweed, which is apparently taken over her garden?
Oh, Robin, there is a good news and bad news. You know the bad news. It can really take over once it gets going. But this is a weed that you can manage. It will take a lot of work depending on how much is coming up. But if you can catch this weed before the flowers go to seed, you are in good shape. Now is the time to be out doing this. Once it goes to seed, that's all producing all of next year's weeds. So if it really did take over last year, this may be hard for this year, but you get yourself set for next year. This weed, it's Pelgonum pennsylvanicum, is a summer annual. And like a lot of weeds, it's actually sort of pretty. I think it's one of the prettier little flowers that goes on. But it is very invasive, as you know, and it tends to like wet areas in the yard. So that's the one other thing you can do in your landscape. You can consider where you're seeing it come up and analyze if it is an area where you can stop extra moisture from being in that area, like near downspouts or a low area. Maybe you could put in rocks or mulch or landscape the area in some different way that will discourage the wetness that this smartweed loves. If you find that ridding yourself of the plant before it goes to seed is too onerous in terms of kneeling down and picking out every one and hand weeding, there are products, glyphosate products, Burnout and Prize Fighter, that will work. They only if you use it to catch the plant in the young growing stages, just the same as you said. After it goes to seed, it's a lost cause for that year. But this is something to apply very carefully according to the manufacturer's directions and could affect the surrounding vegetation. So you need to be quite careful with how you use it because you don't want to hurt plants in your landscape that you're trying to protect. If you get out there early, if you have maybe some help from a family member and you have a lot of energy, you can make a difference in this plant in the landscape. It isn't the hardest to manage. So good luck, and perhaps you can get ahead of it this season.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. Okay. Our next question is from Ronnie. It's regarding a magnolia. It's basically Henry's asking, what has happened to my magnolia? It looks droopy. It's a 3-year-old tree.
Yeah. Well, I sort of sympathize with you. I'm a magnolia lover myself. And yeah, the tree looks a bit droopy. But there's a lot going on here, and it's mostly visible in the trunk of your tree. You can see first that it's a graft. And I don't know, grafting is complicated, and I'm sure the grafters know what they're doing. But it's quite important in grafting that the different growth layers are carefully lined up. And it may be that they were not. I'm not sure. But definitely the problem is a trunk-related disease or multiple diseases. This looks like it's caused by wood decaying fungi, which produce these mushroom-like growths that you see on the base of the tree trunk at the point where the graft has occurred. And other kinds of fungal structures outside the tree trunk. So this causes the tree to weaken and make it unable even to support its own weight. for this particular tree, you can see that there are all these little suckers coming out from the base. And so our recommendation would be that you cut off the top part of the tree where you've got all the diseases of the trunk and allow the suckers to come up, or select one sucker that looks particularly strong and then allow that to grow. And that way the disease part will be gone and you can still have a magnolia tree, but you will lose a good bit of your existing tree. That's what I would say. Steve, I don't know if you have anything more to add to the magnolia tree story.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. The issue, it seems maybe possibly something right around the soil line. It may have been, I don't know, damaged, girdled, or possibly mishandled when it was planted. It's a little uncertain. It seems to go around, right around the base. So it's a little uncertain. It's a little unnerving, and unfortunately, it is so low to the ground that even whatever the cause is, if you cut, there's no real place to cut below it because it's right at the ground, and it's kind of so it may. Whether it's a graft unit and a failed graft unit, it's a little hard to tell, but it's right around there. So I'm afraid maybe there was a rope or something, or someone might have tied something next to it and it was left on there, maybe damaged. I'm not sure. So it's just throwing a few thoughts there. So our next question is from Pamela Durwood. She question is this. Hello, I was trying to get information on taking care of my Japanese Harringtonia yew. So what she has is a plum yew. It's very similar to our regular yew, the English yew, the Japanese yew. It's kind of a cousin to that. It looks pretty similar to something on the plants. It's white, sticky stuff. And I know this is let's see, this came through over the phone. It was transcribed. It's white spots. It's sticky. Just wondered what this was and what can I do about it. So basically, it looks like you have a soft scale. So scales an insect. There's a group of insects called soft scales, and there's a group of insects called hard scales. And what the soft scale insects do is they feed on the plant, so do the hard scales, but the soft scales will secrete a sticky substance. It's their excrement, and in this excrement, there's some sugars in there, a fair amount of sugars. And a fungus will feed on those sugars. So first comes out the sticky material. It's kind of very sticky, almost like you get on a glazed donut, a kind of sticky material. Then later on, a fungus feeds on it, and that fungus will turn the sticky material black, and they call it sooty mold. So that's often, for a lot of people, that's the first symptom they see. They look inside the inner foliage of their yew or their plum yew is darkened and it's blackened, or camellia. So there's a lot of different plants. In fact, one of the more popular types of soft scale is called cottony camellia scale. Now, it does get onto camellias, it gets onto yews, gets onto hollies, gets onto Japanese plum yews too. So they have about one generation a year. What they're going to do is they overwinter as an immature, and then they mate, and they have these little cottony, fluffy material. And inside that cottony, fluffy material kind of looks like the tip of a Q-tip swab, are the eggs. And what we're going to do, the best time of the year to really manage this, is to wait for these eggs to hatch, and which should be shortly, usually sometime here in June. And they're going to crawl from the foliage from last year to the new growth. And it's when they come out and crawl, that's when they're very vulnerable. You can, if you have a very small plant, you can hose them off. And it works very well. If you've got a larger plant, you might want to consider using a type of insecticide. Now, you can use some of what I call some of the softer types of insecticides, and they do a very good job. So things like neem oil, horticulture oil, insecticidal soap. The coverage is key. You've got a small plant, got to make sure you get an insecticide on the underside of the leaves, and you got to wait for the crawls to come out. So you got to wait. So if you go out there in the next, few days, get your hand lens or a magnifying glass, they're going to be really small. And if you see them start to come up, move out there, to the new growth, that's the time to apply to do that. You can also do dormant control of it with horticulture or during the dormant season if you want. But right now, that's what I use. And again, if you have a small plant, hosing it off works really well. And one little trick is, the one problem is if you have plants, the branches are really low to the ground. That's often that's one of the ones we usually miss. So they reinfest. So you might have to lift those branches up low to the ground. Make sure you get those. And hopefully, after 2 to 3, treatments, you should hopefully have this suppressed to a level that's manageable. So, I'm going to jump over to our next question. This one's for Lisa, and it's regarding pruning. And you catch it right here. And this is from Aaron from Rockville, and has some, looks like a really large, some rhododendron there. These old bushes have overgrown their space. When can I prune them, and what should I do? How should I do it? So,
well, this question is right in the wheelhouse of all home gardeners. What to do about the landscape when it gets a little out of control, and how to bring it back into what at least your vision is for your yard. And that is, along with how and when to do it, really the guiding thing in this is going to be what you want to achieve. So you need to spend a bit of time. Sure, you've noticed this is overgrown. It brought you to bring the question to us. But you want to go out there and think about, what would you ideally like it to look like? You need that idea in mind before you get your loppers or your pruners out. So you have picked just exactly the right time of the year to be working on this, because the one time of the year that's appropriate for doing a big pruning would be after the foliage of the plants has fully come out and then is spent. And the pictures come to us now. I'm pretty sure your rhododendron blossoms have probably started to fall off. And so this is the ideal time. So it's a great timely question. So looking at this, we see the purple, and a big purple and large white rhododendron and with a photinia, red tip photinia behind it. And I'm going to guess you're not worried about the evergreen trees that are beyond that. And in the front, behind the birdhouse, 2 azaleas. So starting overall, you get your idea of how much lower you would like the plants to be. And if you wish to keep a naturalistic shape, that is up to gardeners. There are some people who like things tightly managed, but to look at where this is now, I'm thinking you'd like it to be natural, cascading, but less high and less crowded. And one of the things you're going to achieve, which will help your plants health-wise, in doing the pruning to make them less overgrown, you're also going to be able to achieve greater circulation of air around and between these plants, which will help them thrive in the future. So the material, what you really need, you need some pruners. I recommend bypass pruners. Having used anvil type pruners before, I was more experienced in finding out that a bypass pruner, I think, will do an even better job. And you might want to have some loppers, which is a long handled cutter for branches that would be like over an inch larger than you'd want to work with your pruners. And contrary to what you might think about when you think of someone going to work on hedges or bushes, you aren't just going to be giving a haircut over the top of your shrubs. In fact, to approach an overgrown situation like this, you're going to be thinking of what's called the 1/3 rule. And that is that you probably want to remove about 1/3 of the plant material, but not like a haircut from the top, not like 1/3 of its growth in height necessarily, but for the thorough plant all the way around it. And this means something you probably haven't thought of, because you probably think of cutting as in being on top of the growth of the top of the leaves and where the flowers were. Instead, one of the first things you want to do is get into and behind your plant. Go in, get your head and you have to move around and get in there so you can see the structure of the plant itself, because what you're going to want to do is cut out about a third, it could be a little less, but everybody who does this tends to fall on the side of being too timid to do this. But big thing that happens with pruning and why it's such a wonderful activity, not just for looks, is that it produces more growth. It sends a signal and produces more growth in the plant. And that's what you're going to stimulate growth by pruning. So you don't want to just prune to the exact ultimate height you want the plant. You're going to prune a little bit more than that, allowing room for the plant to grow the way you want it to in subsequent seasons. So the rhododendron on the left, in the purple, probably want to start with those upper shoots that are a little wild, and get in there and decide if you want anything at that level, or if you might like to bring that whole shrub down to the level of where the bulk of the growth is. You might leave some up there. You might just bring it down a little bit, but whatever you do, you're not just going to trim like from the top of the leaves. You're going to go and follow a branch down into the plant and cut it where it begins. And following with that, the photinia, which is between the white and the purple rhododendron, you may want to cut that totally out of the picture, because unless it is providing some screening that's really valuable to you, it will allow more circulation of air between the two large rhododendrons. So think about that, and pretty much consider taking that down out of the picture or cutting it back down significantly. And a lot of this will really depend on what you want for the yard, how much screening the height of it gives you, or if you want it to look more manicured. And with the azaleas, the same thing goes, even though it's going to be on a smaller scale. You're going to want to get in there and get down with your clippers, removing like 1 out of every 3 branches. So you get more air and you stimulate growth, and you give them a really nice look. And if you feel that you can bring out some more water to them, it can be a shock, especially if you do a very large pruning. So you will want to keep them moist in the following weeks after this, so they aren't too shocked by what you've done. But they will really, really appreciate this. And do remember, most people are too timid when they do this, and do not give it a haircut just from the top around, but from the inside up.
All right. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, I think we have one more question for Ronnie. So Ronnie, we have a question from Paula asking about bumps on my Fothergilla, but how can I get rid of them? I think she actually has a witch hazel here. So Ronnie?
All right. Well, galls.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. They're always ugly, and they always make everything look diseased and sort of icky. But you do not have to, I guess the short bottom line is that this is not something you need to worry about or do anything about for now. So what are these creepy things? They're abnormal growths of the plants themselves. They happen when insects or mites damage the plants by chewing on them, and their salivary secretions cause the plants to increase production of their normal plant growth hormones. And these higher hormones result in greater cell numbers and size. And these cells, as they grow, are what are called, these growths are called galls. The galls can keep growing, and they will often continue to grow and stay even after the insects that caused them are gone. So they do look unsightly, but they will not harm the plant. They're just actually extensions of the plant themselves. Let's see. So how can you protect them from galls? Well, once they're there, there's no need to do anything. Your plants are still healthy. But using any kind of chemical applications are not effective because for them to work, the timing needs to be just so. So it's best not to apply pesticides or any kinds of treatment. They need to be, if so, they need to be done before the gall forms, and that can be complicated. Again, you can apply horticultural oil or something simple to prevent, for instance, when aphids cause the galls, you would want to have this applied before the insects are there. So early in the seasons, I suppose you could apply those, but just remember that they don't really cause any damage and you really don't need to do anything about them. Thank you. Steve?
Thanks, Ronnie. Okay, so in the future, remember, if you would like to submit a question, please go to our link. We'll have our link probably posted up on here just in a minute, and try to provide as much detail as you possibly can. Photos are really welcome, and they're very important. So the cutoff for the next session of the In the Garden to submit questions is Friday, June 11th at 6 p.m. We'll try to get those answered on their next session, which will be Tuesday, June 15th. Please include your email address in case of follow-up, and if we'll try to make every effort to answer your question on air. But if we run out of time, we'll try to provide an answer by email. So, we're almost about out of time today, but I'll check with Bev. Bev, were there questions?
We do have one question.
All right, let's go for that one question. Okay. I think we might have time. Okay. All right.
I have a new tabletop garden. I've been very successful with kale, chard, radishes, and lettuce. I'm new to this kind of gardening. What are some good vegetables to plant now that the weather is turning warmer? It's about 5 inches deep.
About 5 inches deep. So I'm not sure if Ronnie wants to, or Lisa wants to say anything, but I'll follow up. But Lisa, okay. Ronnie, go ahead.
Well, I'm a vegetable gardener, so certainly all the lettuces and spinach in particular, if you're a spinach lover, and herbs, a whole bunch of herbs can be planted in just that 5 inches. If you want to be a little bit bold and you like beans, then the little bush beans will do it in 5 inches. And baby carrots, if you get the little 1 inchers, you don't need more than 5 inches. So I don't know, others may have other ideas, but those came to mind immediately.
Oh, they sound great. The only one I might add in there is some basil, maybe something like that. But I think Ronnie's got some good options there. So I think maybe at this point, I'm going to thank Ronnie and Lisa for being our experts today. And I also want to thank our researchers for helping us out. And thank you all for joining us. Our next In the Garden will be on June 15th at noon. Remember, if you have any questions that you would like to be answered, please contact us on the link that's going to be shown on the screen by June 11th by 6 p.m. And see you all again soon, I hope. Thank you.